Hello, my name is Chastity Davis Alphonse, and I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, whose lands I'm standing on today. I'd also like to invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples where you are. So far in this learning program, we've provided an overview of what TELUS has done and will continue doing to embed truth and reconciliation in its business. We've also provided a brief overview of our shared history in Canada and why reconciliation is critical for our shared future. Now we're going to look at how we all can continue to foster reconciliation. It might seem impossible that one person could have an impact on a national level, but remember that every act of truth and reconciliation in Canada happened as a result of Indigenous-led efforts for change. These acts have been occurring since contact and are too numerous to discuss in this short video. But one important example of when an Indigenous-led act of resistance moved the dial on justice, equity, and meaningful recognition of our inherent rights was when the Canadian Constitution was being updated in the early 1980s. Initially, Indigenous peoples weren't consulted. Indigenous peoples and leaders gathered in peaceful protest across Canada in a demonstration called the Constitution Express to advocate for the inclusion of Aboriginal title and rights in the Constitution. As a result of these efforts, a new section was added to the Constitution, Section 35. This monumental achievement represented an opportunity to address the detrimental effects of the Indian Act. This was also one of the first times that Canada officially recognized the existence of Aboriginal title and rights at our highest level, our Constitution, which influences every aspect of Canadians' lives. However, it didn't further define what those rights are. The onus was put on Indigenous peoples to define and prove their title and rights, continuing our resistance against the colonial definitions placed on us as Indigenous peoples. We have been and continue doing this in a number of ways, including fighting and winning through the courts in an effort to define our Aboriginal title and rights. Another example of Indigenous-led transformative change is the largest class action lawsuit in Canadian history, initiated by residential school survivors. This lawsuit resulted in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, also known as the TRC. This important achievement led to the collection of data and truths from survivors across the country. The final report shared in 2015 lays out these truths and the negative legacy of residential schools and led to the 94 calls to action which serve as a framework for Canada's reconciliation, accountability, and responsibilities. The TRC guiding principles also led to Canada officially adopting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, also known as UNDRIP, providing a universal framework of standards for the survival, dignity, and well-being of Indigenous peoples. This framework was adopted by the BC government in 2019, and the Canadian government incorporated it into legislation with the passing of Bill C-15 in 2021. There is much more work still to be done in implementing UNDRIP, and action plans are being created in partnership with Indigenous leaders on how best to move forward. The calls to action also urged for the establishment of a statutory holiday, and this is now observed annually on September 30th, known as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Another important example of Indigenous-led grassroots advocacy is the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirit, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, Questioning, Intersex, Asexual, plus people. It examined the ongoing social, economic, cultural, institutional, and historical causes of violence against Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender-diverse individuals. It also laid out the 231 calls for justice, which serve as a guide for how we can all be involved in ensuring that they live with dignity. Finally, in October 2022, after generations of denying the truth of the mistreatment of Indigenous peoples, the House of Commons unanimously accepted that the legislation Canada created and enforced on Indigenous peoples through the Indian Act, including the residential school system, was genocide. Truth is needed to advance reconciliation, and the acknowledgement of Canada's truth is a monumental step forward. With these milestone actions, many Canadians have demonstrated a heightened awareness of, investment in, and commitment to advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. However, it's important to recognize that acts of resistance, coupled with relentless multi-generational leadership by Indigenous peoples, have led Canada to where it is today. Resistance to colonial policies is the reason that Indigenous peoples and communities are moving from surviving to thriving. The movement is in its early stages, and much more still needs to be done. Truth and reconciliation is a multifaceted, multi-generational journey and won't be achieved overnight. But we all have a role to play now. The opportunity is for this generation to pick up the torch, honor the work of our ancestors, and move forward together. Canada will only achieve its full potential when the original peoples of these lands realize their full potential. We all need to work together to create a more just and equitable country, to create a lasting legacy of inclusion and justice that will not only benefit Indigenous peoples, but all Canadians. My hope is that after watching this video, you feel inspired to act and to contribute to this important movement. And you can start today by committing to just one of the many actions outlined in the final part of this program. Part 4 of the program will offer a multitude of ways that you can actively participate in the movement. From examining your political party's platform, to incorporating land acknowledgements into your email signatures, to joining the TELUS resource group Eagles. And as always, be sure to visit Go Reconciliation Program, where you'll find topical deep dive resources to support your continued learning. Amawiga.